Right, so in the last episode, I introduced you to my Porsche 996 Carrera, which is tucked away for winter behind me. So I thought for this episode, it might be quite interesting to see how much it's actually cost over the last 3 years of ownership. So we'll just remove the cover, which handily matches my top. And it was very nicely given to me by the last owner. So that's really useful for keeping it just free when it's tucked away in here. So just as a recap, if you haven't seen it, there it is. That's lovely. And if you didn't watch that first video, I'll put a link at the end to why I bought a car with such high mileage and what I think of it to drive and all the rest of it. But for this one, I thought we would focus on those costs and break it down into 3 sections. So servicing and then maintenance, and then more kind of admin costs like insurance and tax and MOT and that kind of thing. So the first thing you should probably know is this is a 3.4 litre model. This is pre-facelift, and these cars need servicing once a year. So I bought the car from Autofarm, and on the first year I took it back to them for the service. So and they're great. I was really happy with the service there. They charged me £300 for that first service, and I was really happy with that. But after that first year, I didn't go back to Autofarm just because they're quite a long way away from me. It's about 2 hours one way. And I just wanted somewhere a bit closer, and if there was anything wrong with the car, I needed to go back, would I be hanging around for the car, sort of thing. So on a recommendation, I went to German Auto Specialists, or German Auto Solutions, I think, in Uppingham, and they've serviced it for the last 2 years. So the first year, that was £228, and the latest service was £238, which again, a bit cheaper than Autofarm, and it's closer, more convenient. So I was really happy with that, and they seem to be really good guys as well. Inside we've got all the service history actually, and the service, because it's high mileage, the service book is actually full now. So let's take a look at this. All fully stamped up by a lot of Autofarm stamps in there as well. And this is the last one, 145,000, and that's the last available stamp. The rest of it goes into brake fluid. There's some spaces there, but this is the actual, that's the last stamp for a service. So I'll have to get that replaced. But that's quite cool to have it all fully stamped, like a Panini sticker album, really. I've done the lot. And this, more importantly, really, is the all the receipts. And this was owned by a German solicitor before, so he's really been really diligent in keeping it nicely filed. And here's my little notes here as well to help us through today for this next section for maintenance, which is slightly more complicated. So the first thing that I wanted to mention was the Trickle Charge, which I do treat as a maintenance item, because if you're not using a 996 very regularly, they do tend to flatten their batteries. If you're not, maybe you go out, don't use it that much, then you put it back in the garage for 2 weeks. That could do for the battery, and so I keep it on this Trickle Charger down here. Ignore that unicorn, by the way, that's not mine. I keep it there, plugged in, and that just means every time I start it, the battery's fully topped up, so that's useful. But I found that out the hard way by flattening the battery a few times, and unfortunately, when I jump started it, despite what I thought was doing everything correctly, and I'm pretty sure I did, the airbag ECU or the airbag light was on, and maybe it was my fault, but either way, the light was on, and I got a quote for that to replace the airbag ECU, which was a pretty horrific £1,700. So a bit of a shock, especially for something that was completely unnecessary had I just put it on a Trickle Charger to start off with. But I found a solution. I went to online. I found a place called Douglas Valley Breakers, and they sold an airbag ECU for £50, which wasn't too bad. And it was from an identical car, but they do need coding to the car, so that was another £50. So it was £100 in total, which was a much more palatable bill than £1,700. And if it does happen to you, actually, let me just show you. It's not a difficult job to actually get it in there. So the airbag ECU, if you can see in here, there's this trim, there's a gear stick, and the trim down here. You just remove this and take the ECU out, which isn't a big job, and that solved it. So there we go. And so the other job at that was done at German Auto Solutions as well, the recoding of the airbag. The other job at first, was £386. So that's minus £50 because that was part of the airbag ECU. So 336 basically for coffin arm replacement, which is one of the suspension arms. I think there's a couple of other small little things they did at the same time. And then last year the alternator went, so that needed replacing. I took that to a garage just down the road, and that was £472 to get fixed. And then it's had 4 new tyres all round. So I've stuck with the Pirelli P0s here. So these are on the front. These are 225 40 ZR 18 in the correct N4 Porsche fitment, and they were £120 on the front axle per side, and then on the rear I think they were about £200 on the rear for a larger size 265 35 ZR 18 on the rears. So for the tyres about £640 all round. And I also did the brakes, as I mentioned in the last video. So I spent more than I needed to on the parts, but I wanted really good parts. So Zebro discs from Car Parts for Less were £340 all round, and they were really good actually. I actually stupidly bought or ordered a disc for a Carrera 4S on one side, and they're actually wider, and I didn't realise until I went to offer it up to the car, and it didn't fit. So I'd opened the box and everything, tried to fit it. I sent it back, and they're really good, and just and sent the correct disc, even though it was completely my fault. And I ordered some Ferodo DS 2500 race pads, which I mentioned last month, I think, when I did a video. I could have got some cheaper pads, but again, I wanted top-notch parts, and I wanted to improve the brake pedal feel. They were, I can't remember where I got them from now. It wasn't Car Parts for Less though. It was a Scottish motorsport place, and they were £250. So again, I could have saved a lot of money on that. And then I got anti-squeal shims for £80. And I think really by the time everything was said and done, a bit of brake grease and that kind of thing, the final bill was £713. So what else have we got? That is it in terms of our total maintenance costs. So that brings us on to those sort of admin costs, as I mentioned. So insurance, I've been really pleasantly surprised. I've had the car insured with my wife on it, and this year I paid £217. So 217, so 217 on a limited mileage policy. So I think under 4,000 miles a year. But even so, I think that's really reasonable, fully comp and everything, of course. And tax is £270 a year, and then we have MOTs which are 50. So I totted all this up earlier. So the total cost of ownership, so servicing £766, maintenance is £2,341 over 3 years, and running costs in terms of tax, MOT, insurance is £1,611. And I reckon I do £400 or £500 a year in fuel. I do 2,000-3,000 miles a year. I don't use it loads. And there's another job for year 4 is the steering rack. So the steering rack is leaking. It's not dangerous at all. There's not even any fluid on the floor, but there is a little bit of fluid coming out of the boots on the steering rack. So I'll get that done, and that I may do that myself if I'm feeling brave. And yeah, I think the important thing to notice or to mention is, you know, so I'm really happy with that cost over 3 years. But I bought the car really well. I think it is high mileage, 146,000, but it's been really well looked after. I tend to pamper it a bit more than I thought I would. It's never been on track with me. And I don't do many miles. I do 2,000 or 3,000 miles. So obviously, if that's different for you, if you buy, you know, your car's not in as good a condition, or you do more track days, or you're doing more miles, all those kind of costs are going to go up. So bear that in mind. But yeah, for me, £1,500 to £2,000 a year, something like that, and I've got all my costs covered, which I'm really happy with. So yeah, and also I wanted to say thank you very much for all your clicks on the last video, which hopefully I'm going to put up here to. So you can have a look at that if you haven't seen it already. Really appreciate that. It did much more than I thought it would, which has encouraged me to do more stuff in the future. And it would be great if you could also subscribe. And hopefully we can do more of this kind of thing in the future. Well, thanks very much.